So absinthe has been first mentioned in literature, literally referring to Artemisia absinthium, or the wormwood plant. When absinthe then became synonymous with the liquor absinthe was late 1700s, early 1800s. Pernod Ricard was the first commercially produced brand in 1797 in Switzerland, and they moved to Pontillier, France in 1805, which is where they really had their first big factory and made their first real commercial push. Absinthe got its real kind of big kick into the French culture in more the 1830s, 1840s, the North African Wars. The French soldiers were prescribed wormwood or absinthe and tonics over while fighting to, I think it was more of a anti-malaria, anti-dysentery type treatment, and when they came back after fighting they had a taste for this absinthe, and they were supposed to add just a little bit of absinthe to their water to clean their water and purify their water, but I think they switched it around and were adding just a little water to their absinthe and having a little more recreational fun. And then really exploded around the time of the Belle Epic, you know, a drink of the creative class, and that's right when phylloxera, this little bug, attacked the European grapevines, wiping out most of the European grapevines, and absinthe really gained market share at the time because a lot of the absinthe base switched from a grape cognac base to either a sugar beet or a grain base alcohol, and it was cheaper to produce. The French had a big taste for it, and there was not as much wine out on the market, so absinthe really gained good market share. And at this time, when the grapes started to come back and wine started to be a little more abundant again, the winemakers then kind of smear campaigned absinthe to regain that market share that they had lost during this time. So a lot of the information about absinthe has really been a marketing and PR push for over 100 years from some winemakers that had big bankrolls and were losing a lot of business to absinthe. It was reintroduced in the US in 2007, and this was due to the efforts of a couple people, and Ted Breaux being the most influential researcher on absinthe kind of in the last 10-15 years, and he really pushed with Viridian Spirits. Lucid was the first brand that came back into the US, and really showed through scientific research that much of the myth over the last century plus has been just that, just myth, and that absinthe is chemically no different than any other type of spirit or booze, and no actual laws were changed. In 2007, policy was changed regulating thujone, which is the chemical which is found in wormwood, which was originally blamed for some hallucinogenic properties and kind of the scapegoat for why absinthe was bad, and they kind of raised the level of stuff being 0 thujone to having 10 milligrams per liter, until 10 milligrams per liter is authentic to century-old absinthe, and finally allowed for the original use and distillation of Artemisia absinthium, or wormwood, in absinthe. So an experimental mind who's into trying new different things but hasn't come across absinthe yet might find first of all, absinthe is an anise-based spirit, so wormwood is one of the main 3 ingredients, but you get an anise and fennel base as well, so you kind of have a licoricey type taste. However, there's no licorice in it, but it's a similar taste, and you can kind of understand that way. But absinthe is made very similarly to gin. There's a green absinthe category and a white absinthe category. The white absinthe category is made exactly the same as gin. And the green absinthe category starts as a white absinthe, so it's made like a gin, where you take all these herbs and botanicals, macerate them in a neutral spirit, and then distill them. Green absinthe is then colored after that with basically a big tea bag of herbs that you soak in it, and the color comes from there. So you'd either expect a green product or a white product. There are some more inferior products which are artificially colored, which are almost synonymous with Eastern European countries that market in the hallucinogenic type vein. So if you see a bright green or bright blue, you can almost automatically assume that it's lesser quality absinthe, but you'd either see a naturally green, which is almost a green yellow, or a clear, and you can also assume that absinthe is going to be higher proof. The green absinthe is a little higher proof than the white absinthe because the alcohol actually acts as a preservative for the color. So there is some fact in that absinthe is a little higher proof, but it is only meant to be consumed with water authentically. So by the time you add 3 parts or 4 parts of water to 1 part absinthe, it should be the same amount of alcohol as a glass of wine. So there really is no way that it should be viewed differently than any other type of high quality spirit, but it again should be used responsibly and, you know, imbibed that way. The absinthe ritual is something, again, there's a little misinformation about. I come across a lot of people who think setting absinthe on fire is the way to do things. I've never come across anybody who would set their Macallan 18 on fire, or, you know, chartreuse on fire, or some other highly respected, regarded spirit, but for some reason people want to set absinthe on fire, and that is, again, a marketing ploy that in only the early 1990s, so this is only 15 years ago, that absinthe kind of started getting popular again in Europe, and there were these artificially colored, artificially flavored, low-quality absinthes that didn't louche, and louche is what happens when you drip the water into the absinthe. The oils precipitate out of it, and in order to distract the consumer away from the lower quality absinthe, they started this setting absinthe on fire ritual. So everybody has heard of that or knows that ritual, but it is actually inauthentic to 100-year-old absinthe and is almost synonymous with poor quality absinthe. Actual ritual involves a slotted spoon over your glass of absinthe, putting a sugar cube on it, and then dripping ice water through your sugar cube. So wormwood is technically a really bitter herb, so the sugar is to sweeten it up a little bit. I prefer it without sugar, so I just like to drip some ice water into it because I kind of like the bitter dryness that it has, and I don't like overly sweet things. So I think the ritual with the absinthe fountain dripping ice water into absinthe is completely authentic, completely cool, neat. You can share it with your friends, but it also does not need to cripple absinthe in that you need that to drink it, because absinthe, like anything else, can be used in a plethora of cocktails. Can be drank shaken with ice and water and doesn't need to necessarily be the absinthe drip. I would recommend absinthe drip if possible, but it shouldn't hinder the category. Like, I think a lot of people think you have to go through this ritual to drink absinthe, when in reality absinthe can be used in a myriad of different ways.